What happened to me that night? Why did I feel something wake up inside me? Sally Field asked this with a soft laugh, the kind that slides under the skin and stays there. In a recent conversation, the host leans forward, eyes bright with mischief, and asks her if, at nearly 8 decades of life, she still remembers the men who made her breath catch in her throat, the ones who made her imagine things she never admitted out loud. Sally does not flinch. She lifts her chin, her eyes glowing with a daring spark, and the entire room leans in as if pulled by a wire. Then she says it. There were men she wanted in ways she never confessed. Men whose presence made her heartbeat shift, whose voices stayed in her memory long after they walked away. Not simple crushes, not harmless fantasies, something deeper, something far more dangerous. The host nudges her to reveal more, and Sally only smiles, slow and knowing, savoring the tension, letting the anticipation stretch across the room like warm silk. She promises to name them, one by one, and every person present forgets how to breathe. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you are ready for the truth, comment the number 1 below. The first man was James Garner, the gentleman outlaw, charming and easygoing the way only an old-school cowboy could be. Back in 1985 on the set of Murphy's Romance, he treated Sally Field like she was something rare, gentle, patient, steady, kind, a man who carried a quiet confidence that needed no introduction and no explanation. But beneath that warm, easy smile lived something else, a heat, a slow, careful danger that did not announce itself but wrapped around you before you knew it was there. James Garner had a way of turning simple gestures into something that stole your breath. A hand resting lightly at the small of her back, the soft brush of his shoulder as he passed her in set, a smile that stayed a heartbeat too long, just long enough to make her wonder. Sally always joked that working with him should have come with a warning label. Caution, may cause daydreams. And she meant every word of it, because the chemistry was not something they created. It was something he breathed. She remembered one rehearsal more clearly than she remembered half the trophies on her shelf. Jim slipped his arm around her shoulders with that natural ease that only a few men are blessed with. It was not a move filled with intention. It was simply who he was. But in that moment, Sally forgot everything. The script, the lights, the lines, the entire crew staring at them. She had to remind herself they were filming, because what she was thinking had nothing to do with the scene. Many years later, she finally admitted the truth. In that single moment, she imagined grabbing him by the collar, pulling him straight off the soundstage, closing her trailer door behind him, and not letting him leave until dawn. The thought hit her so hard she nearly missed her cue. The crew whispered about their spark. They saw it, felt it, tiptoed around it. The audience believed it was acting. But Sally insisted the strongest parts were the moments the camera never caught. The hesitation before he spoke. The warm silence between them. The tiny touch that was not meant to be anything at all, yet somehow meant everything. James Garner carried a kind of masculinity that did not need to be polished or groomed. He did not perform it. He did not announce it. It simply lived in the way he moved, in the way he looked at you. Every other man in the room dimmed a little when he stepped forward. When Jim looked at her, Sally said she lost all the words she had prepared, not because she forgot them, but because the only thing she wanted to say was yes. It was not lightning. It was not a storm. It was something quieter and far more dangerous. The kind of attraction that slips under your skin and makes itself comfortable. What made him irresistible was not showmanship, not bravado, not even his good looks, though he had plenty of those. It was the ease he carried, the warmth he radiated, the steady presence that made her wonder every single day on set how far he might go if she ever asked him to. If Jim had asked me back then, she admitted, I would have said yes before he finished the question. And perhaps that was James Garner's true power. Not that he was kind or handsome or endlessly gentle, but that he made Sally Field, America's sweetheart, imagine being something other than innocent. And the truth was simple. She loved imagining it. The second man was Burt Reynolds, the wildfire with a grin so reckless it could set a room alight before he even spoke. On the set of Smokey and the Bandit in 1977, Sally Field was already a star, already disciplined, already cautious. But none of that mattered when Burt leaned against a car door and looked at her like he already knew what she was thinking before she did. Burt Reynolds did not walk onto a set. He arrived. He filled the air. He bent the mood around him. He had a swagger that was somehow both playful and dangerous. The kind of presence that made even a simple action like chewing gum look suggestive. Every time he tipped his hat, every time his shoulders relaxed into that lazy southern slant, Sally felt something inside her slip one step closer to trouble. With Bert, trouble was not a warning. It was an invitation. He could turn an ordinary afternoon into a spark and a spark into a fire. Sally used to laugh about how he could make the most boring tasks feel like a scene that should have come with parental guidance. Watching him lean over the hood of a car felt more charged than half the love scenes she had filmed in her life. And Bert leaned into their chemistry shamelessly. He teased her between takes. He winked even when he had no reason to. He let his hands linger a breath longer than needed. Not long enough for anyone to call it unprofessional, just long enough for Sally to feel it. There was a moment on set she never forgot. The director called cut, but Bert kept holding her, keeping her close with that soft, confident grip that made her forget where reality ended and the script began. She remembered thinking that if he did not let go, she might not either. She later admitted that she sometimes hoped the director would mess up a shot on purpose, just so she could feel that warmth again. Crew members whispered about the fire between them. They watched the way Bert's eyes softened when he looked at her, the way Sally's smile changed whenever he walked near. It was not acting, at least not all of it. And everyone knew that. What made Bert dangerous, it was not arrogance. It was awareness. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew the effect he had, and he enjoyed it. He was the kind of man who laughed like he would daring the world to stop him. The kind of man who could make a woman feel seen, wanted, and slightly overwhelmed in the best way possible. The kind of man who carried temptation lightly, like it was a part of his wardrobe. Sally admitted years later that Bert could have asked her anything, absolutely anything, and she would have said yes before he finished the sentence. Not because she lacked control, but because Bert made surrender feel fun. He made danger feel like a game she wanted to play. Their chemistry on screen became iconic. Fans adored it. Studios celebrated it. But Sally remembered the moments between scenes, the quiet beats, the small touches, the looks that lasted a fraction too long. Burt Reynolds was more than a co-star. He was the spark that almost became a flame. He was the second man who made Sally Field feel something she was not expecting. And the truth was simple. She never once regretted feeling it. The third man was Paul Newman, a calm and devastating presence wrapped in a face the world already worshipped. By the time Sally Field sat across from him on the set of Absence of Malice in 1981, he was already a legend, a man with a reputation for modesty, kindness, and a beauty so famous it had become its own mythology. But Sally discovered something the world never fully understood. Paul Newman was dangerous, not loudly, not aggressively, dangerous in the quiet way a tide can pull you under without making a sound. It always started with his eyes, those impossible blue eyes that had been talked about for decades. But talking about them was one thing. Sitting 3 feet away from them was something entirely different. Sally once said that looking into Paul Newman's eyes felt like being seen all the way through, past the charm, past the performance, past every mask she had learned to wear in Hollywood. When he looked at you, you did not feel admired. You felt chosen. Their first scene together was supposed to be simple. A conversation at a table, dialogue, eye contact, nothing complicated. But when Paul leaned forward slightly, his voice low and calm, Sally felt something inside her tilt off balance. She forgot her line. She laughed it off. The crew chuckled politely. Paul smiled that slow, knowing smile as if he understood exactly what had just happened. That was the beginning. Paul never flirted in the obvious way. He did not wink like Burt Reynolds or tease like Robin Williams. His power rested in restraint, in the way he held himself back, letting silence do the work, letting a simple glance linger long enough to feel like the start of a secret. Sally remembered how the room changed whenever he walked in, not because he demanded attention, but because every person nearby seemed to instinctively soften, quiet down, breathe differently. Paul Newman carried peace the way other men carried attitude. But underneath that peace was something warmer and stronger and far more intoxicating. Between takes, he would sit across from Sally, fold his hands, and give her his full attention as if nothing outside that moment mattered. No ego, no rush, no impatience, just an unbroken gaze that made her pulse feel louder than the clapboard. She admitted years later that there were moments she hoped the camera would fail, just so they could reset the shot and sit together a little longer. That was the kind of spell he cast. His voice was its own temptation, smooth, low, with a faint, playful roughness that could turn ordinary words into something that felt intimate. He could ask about lunch, and Sally would feel her stomach drop for reasons that had nothing to do with food. Paul Newman did not have to seduce. He simply existed, and women seduced themselves. One afternoon between scenes, he laughed softly at something she said, the kind of laugh that starts in the eyes before it reaches the mouth, and Sally felt her heart do something ridiculous and completely out of character. She thought about what would happen if she stood up, walked around the table, and pulled him close enough for the headlines to write themselves. She did not move. She was too professional, too disciplined. But the thought stayed, and it stayed for decades. Sally later confessed that if Paul had leaned in, even a little, even by accident, she would have followed him anywhere. Out of the studio, out of the city, out of her better judgment. He never did. And that was what made it worse, or better. Depending on how honest she was feeling, Paul Newman was the quiet dream standing right in front of her, a dream she never touched, a dream she never forgot. And the truth was simple. Some men burn hot, some men burn wild. But Paul Newman burned quietly, deeply, endlessly, and Sally Field felt every bit of that fire. The fourth man was Robin Williams, a living spark, a whirlwind of voices and faces and laughter that could fill a room faster than a sunrise. When Sally Field worked with him on Mrs. Doubtfire in 1993, she expected comedy. She expected energy. She expected chaos. She did not expect the depth. She did not expect the stillness beneath the noise, and she certainly did not expect to find him irresistible. Robin Williams was not like other men. He was not smooth like Paul Newman, not warm like James Garner, not wicked like Burt Reynolds. Robin burned in a different color. He could shift from a dozen accents to a full throat laugh in the span of a breath, leaving the crew bent over with amusement. He could improvise entire conversations with himself, switching characters with a speed that felt almost supernatural. People said Robin was a one-man universe, and Sally believed every word of it, but that was only half the truth. The real shock came in the moments when he stopped, when the noise fell away, when he exhaled and let the world catch up. Sally remembered standing next to him after a long take, both of them still catching their breath. Robin dropped the voices, dropped the jokes, dropped the wild energy that followed him like a second shadow. For a few seconds, he was just Robin, quiet and open, with eyes that carried more emotion than all the characters he had ever played. That was the moment Sally felt something shift inside her, because the silence of Robin Williams was more intimate than most men's flirtation. He would look at her with this gentle, thoughtful focus, as if he saw everything she was and everything she was pretending not to be. And that stillness was enough to make her pulse stutter. She used to tease that if Robin ever turned all that intensity toward just one woman, truly focused it without the jokes to soften the blow, that woman would never recover. And Sally was not entirely sure she would want to. There were days on set when she could not stop watching him, even when the camera was not rolling. He moved with a kind of restless humanity, that made people lean in. He was alive in a way that felt rare, almost impossible. And that kind of aliveness has its own gravity. Robin had a habit of standing too close without realizing it. Then he would laugh, and the sound wrapped around her like warm water. Other times he would fall into one of his thoughtful moods, his voice dropping low, soft, unexpectedly tender. And those moments were the ones Sally remembered most vividly. She admitted years later that if Robin had ever leaned in, even slightly, even with the smallest hint of intention, she would have let him sweep her away without asking where they were going. Because he was not just a comedian. He was not just a genius. He was a storm, a joyful storm with a quiet center. And in that quiet center was a man who could undo her with a single unguarded look. Robin Williams made Sally Field laugh until her ribs hurt. He made her think until her heart ached. And he made her wonder, more than once, what might have happened if the right moment had slipped just a little further into something else. The truth was simple. Robin Williams was unforgettable, and Sally Field never tried to forget him. The fifth man was Clint Eastwood, a tall, quiet force who carried danger the way other men carried cologne. Sally Field never acted with him, not once in her entire career, but somehow that made him even more powerful. Clint Eastwood existed in her memory the way a storm sits on the horizon. You do not have to stand in the rain to know it can drown you. She first encountered him in the mid-1980s at a Hollywood gathering where the room was full of famous people, producers, directors, and stars who spent their lives trying to fill every second with noise. But when Clint walked in, the noise thinned out, like a conversation losing its breath. Sally remembered turning her head without meaning to, as if her body registered him before her mind did. Clint Eastwood had that kind of presence. You noticed him before you realized you had noticed. He was a man whose silence spoke louder than most men's speeches. He did not wave. He did not smile big. He did not perform. He simply existed. And existence for Clint Eastwood was enough to shift the entire atmosphere. Sally stood across the room pretending to stay focused on a conversation, but in truth she was watching him from the corner of her eye. He moved slowly, deliberately, like every step had weight. His expression held that quiet, unreadable control that made every woman wonder what he might be thinking and why it mattered so much. He had the kind of stillness that made you lean forward before you realized you had done it. A stillness filled with possibility, with tension, with something that felt like a secret. Sally remembered one moment especially. Clint turned his head slightly, and his eyes passed over her. Not long enough to count as a stare, not short enough to dismiss. Just a soft pass, like wind brushing skin. And Sally felt a small shiver run through her, the kind that told her she was reacting before she had a chance to understand why. She used to joke that Clint Eastwood did not have to flirt. His silence did it for him. His stillness carried more seduction than other men's entire strategies. When he smiled, even faintly, it felt like the world had been let in on a private joke. When he lifted an eyebrow, it felt like an invitation to step closer. And when he did nothing at all, that was when he was the most dangerous. At events, Sally often found herself turning toward him without realizing it. Something about him called to the part of her that wanted danger wrapped in control. Not the wild spark of Burt Reynolds, not the unpredictable chaos of Robin Williams, not the quiet hurt of Paul Newman. Clint was something else. A quiet cliff edge you walk toward even though you know you might fall. She confessed years later that she sometimes imagined what would have happened if Clint had crooked one finger in her direction. Just a small gesture, a silent request. She knew she would have crossed any room, any distance, without asking a single question. Because Clint Eastwood did not chase, he waited. And waiting made him irresistible. His voice, when she heard it up close for the first time, was calm and graveled. Not loud, not sharp, just steady. The kind of voice that could make you rethink your choices or forget them entirely. When he spoke to her that evening, asking a simple question about the event, Sally felt her pulse stumble, as if it had tripped on something invisible. He could undo a woman with a pause. He could unravel her with one quiet glance. Clint Eastwood was not the man Sally worked with. He was the man she wondered about, the man she imagined, the man she felt in her bones even from across a crowded room. And the truth was simple. Silent men can be the loudest. And Clint Eastwood, without even touching her, made Sally Field imagine exactly how dangerous silence could be. The sixth man was Dustin Hoffman, the restless fire, the one who never walked into a room quietly. He entered with a charge, a pulse, an intensity that felt almost too big for the walls around him. Sally Field had worked with many actors, but none approached a scene the way Dustin did. He attacked it, chased it, tore it open until he found something raw and real inside it. Working with Dustin was like standing too close to a flame. You felt the warmth, you felt the danger, and you felt the impossible pull to lean in anyway. Sally remembered the first rehearsal they shared. It was supposed to be simple, a read-through, a calm exploration of the scene. But Dustin did not believe in calm. He leaned forward, eyes sharp, voice tight with intention, studying her as if he was searching for every hidden layer she tried to keep closed. His gaze made her feel both exposed and strangely alive. Dustin had a way of looking at people that felt unsettling and addictive at the same time. He listened with his whole body. He questioned every word, every pause, every breath. Standing across from him did not feel like acting. It felt like confession. Sally admitted later that part of her wanted to slap him for being so intense, and another part wanted to see how far that intensity would go if the scene ever slipped into something unplanned. There was a moment on set that she never forgot. They were rehearsing a confrontation. Dustin pacing back and forth, muttering to himself, shaping his thoughts with that fierce focus that both inspired and exhausted everyone around him. Then he stopped, mid-step, and looked directly at her. Not at her character, not at the script. At her. The room went still, and Sally felt her heartbeat jump, as if his stare had reached inside her and tugged. She had to remind herself they were surrounded by people, because in that instant it felt like they were alone. She used to say that Dustin Hoffman could peel a person open with nothing but silence, and she was not sure whether that thrilled her or terrified her more. His unpredictability made him magnetic. One moment he was challenging her, pushing her to find a deeper truth in the scene. The next he was cracking a joke, his laughter breaking through the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. That blend of fury and softness, brilliance and chaos, was its own form of seduction. With Dustin, you never knew where you stood, and that was exactly why Sally kept leaning closer. She remembered how he would tilt his head when she spoke, narrowing his eyes like he was deciding whether to believe her or push her harder. It made her feel alive in a way few actors ever had. It made her braver. It made her reckless. Years later, she confessed that if Dustin had ever looked at her off-set with the same unfiltered intensity he used during rehearsals, she would have been in trouble. She said she would have spilled every secret she had, and part of her suspected she would have liked doing it. Dustin Hoffman was not a safe man. He was not gentle like James Garner. He was not playful like Burt Reynolds. He was not silent like Clint Eastwood. He was the earthquake, the disruption, the sense that something inside you was about to shift whether you wanted it to or not. And the truth was simple. Dustin Hoffman made Sally Field feel every emotion at once, and she never forgot how dangerously good that felt. The seventh man was Gregory Peck, the monument, the compass, the kind of presence that made morality itself look seductive. By the time Sally Field crossed paths with him in the late 1970s, he was already a towering figure in Hollywood. Not towering because of fame, although he had plenty of that, but towering because he carried something rarer. Integrity so steady it felt like gravity. Gregory Peck did not need to chase attention. Attention simply moved toward him. Sally remembered the first time she saw him in person. It was at an industry dinner, a place crowded with producers, agents, actors, people talking loudly and laughing even louder, all of them trying to be seen. Then Gregory walked in, tall and composed, wearing a quiet confidence that made every conversation soften without anyone realizing why. Sally felt something shift inside her. Not a spark, not a jolt, something deeper. Something like reverence mixed with a pull she did not expect. Gregory Peck carried dignity the way other men carried arrogance. Except his was effortless. He spoke softly, but his voice filled the room. He moved slowly, but people moved aside without being asked. He smiled gently, and somehow it meant more than other men's flirtation. Sally remembered watching him from across the table, noticing the fine lines around his eyes, the patient way he listened to whoever spoke, the calm weight he gave every word. She found herself leaning forward, drawn in, as if his composure alone had created a quiet current pulling her closer. He was not wild like Burt Reynolds. He was not intense like Dustin Hoffman. He was not a storm like Robin Williams. Gregory Peck was the harbor, safe on the surface, dangerous once you stepped inside. His voice carried the kind of resonance that made even simple words feel sacred. When he asked her how she was finding the evening, Sally felt her heart stumble in her chest. Not because the question was special, but because his tone wrapped around it like a vow. Soft, steady, warm. She admitted years later that Gregory Peck could have asked her to pass the salt, and she would have needed a full week to recover. There was a stillness about him that felt magnetic, a kind of quiet authority that made you want to behave, but also made you wonder what it would feel like to disobey. Sally found herself imagining his hand covering hers during dinner. The warmth of it, the weight of it, the meaning that gesture would carry coming from a man like him. She imagined walking beside him, just the two of them, sharing a silence so full it felt intimate. She imagined the gentleness he would offer and the strength beneath it. And she imagined how surrender might feel if she ever allowed herself to give in to that still, unwavering pull. Gregory Peck did not flirt. He did not need to. Women flirted with the idea of him. Sally later confessed that watching him in To Kill a Mockingbird as Atticus Finch had already shaped her view of what goodness could look like. But seeing him in person made her realize something else. Goodness could be seductive. Virtue could be magnetic. Dignity could make a woman's heartbeat speed up just as quickly as danger could. He was the man she admired from a distance, the man she trusted without knowing him, the man she wondered about long after the night ended. Because Gregory Peck represented a different kind of desire, not the blazing kind, not the chaotic kind, but the kind built on respect, steadiness, and quiet command. And the truth was simple. Gregory Peck did not need to chase Sally Field. All he had to do was exist, and she felt herself leaning toward him, willingly, helplessly, beautifully. There is something strangely beautiful about the way Sally Field talked about these 7 men. Not in a sensational way, not in a reckless or dramatic way, but in a way that felt honest, fully human. She was not listing scandals. She was not confessing regrets. She was remembering the moments in her life when someone made her feel alive, seen, stirred. And that is a feeling every person understands, no matter who they are or where they come from. When we look back on our own lives, we often remember the same kinds of people, the warm ones, the wild ones, the dangerous ones, the quiet ones, the ones who made us laugh or made us nervous or made us wonder what might have happened if the timing had been different. We remember the spark, the tension, the unspoken possibilities. We remember the way certain people made the air feel a little different, the way their presence lingered long after they walked away. And that is the real lesson inside Sally Field's stories. At every age, desire does not disappear. Curiosity does not fade. Attraction does not vanish just because years pass. Being human means you keep feeling, keep dreaming, keep remembering. She teaches us that it is not a weakness to admire someone, or to feel something powerful, or to admit that another person once stirred a part of you that you tried to ignore. It is a reminder that life is made of moments, and some moments remain years after the world has forgotten them. There is also something brave about the way she spoke. So many people spend their whole lives pretending they never felt anything too deeply, pretending they were always logical, always composed, always in control. But the truth is simpler. We are all human, and the people who move us tend to be the ones we remember the longest. Sally Field did not tell these stories to shock anyone. She told them because they mattered, because they shaped her, because they revealed parts of her that even fame could not erase. And for all of us watching, there is a message there. Allow yourself to feel. Allow yourself to remember. Allow yourself to be changed by the people who touch your life, even if only for a brief moment. Do not bury your experiences. Honor them, learn from them, laugh about them, and let them become part of the story you carry into the future. If you enjoyed this journey through Sally Field's memories, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story like this again. Your support helps these stories live on. And if you have watched all the way to this point, you are the kind of viewer who truly connects with these moments, these emotions, these truths. So I would love to hear from you. If you are still here, write the number 1 in the comments. Let me know you stayed until the end. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing this moment with me. Moment with me. Moment with me. Moment with me.